What a day. What a day. I swear I've never been so depressed, miserable and lonely in my entire life. It's like I know there's gotta be somebody out there somewhere. Just one person in this huge, horrible, unhappy universe can hold me in their arms and tell me everything's gonna be okay. And how long do I have to wait before that person shows up? I feel like I'm sinking deeper and deeper into quicksand, watching everyone around me die a slow, agonizing death. It's like we all know, way down in our souls, that our generation is going to witness the end of everything. You can see it in our eyes. It's in mine. Look. I'm doomed. I'm only 18 years old and I'm totally doomed.
Did I tell you he could stop clocks? To what purpose? Well, you've heard the expression his face will stop a clock. Well, Harvey can look at your clock and stop it. And you can go anywhere you like, with anyone you like, and stay as long as you like, and when you get back, not 1 minute will have ticked by.
I'm going to sleep now. I will dream of you and your mother. I will sleep knowing that you are both safe, that the fear is over. We have seen the process of life take place. Maybe this is the way it happened on Earth millions of years ago. Maybe it's something completely different. I still don't know really what the monolith is. I think it's many things. An embassy for an intelligence beyond ours. A shape of some kind for something that has no shape. Your children will be born in a world of two suns. They will never know a sky without them. You can tell them that you remember when there was a pitch black sky with no bright stars and people feared the night. You can tell them when we were alone, when we couldn't point to the light and say to ourselves, there's life out there. Someday, the children of the new sun will meet the children of the old. I think they will be our friends. You can tell your children of the day when everyone looked up and realized that we were only tenants of this world. We have been given a new lease and a warning from the landlord.
X-rays, Mason, there was clearly something anterior to the larynx that looked like a laryngeal sac that's strictly simian and obviously regressed to some quasi-simian creature.
I'm going to show this the way to write, because you're reading it wrong, that's all there is to it. Because no one's going to tell me you de-differentiated your goddamn genetic structure for 4 goddamn hours and then reconstituted. I'm a professor of endocrinology at the Harvard Medical School. I'm an attending physician at the Peter Bent Brigham Hospital. I'm a contributing editor to the American Journal of Endocrinology, and I'm a fellow and vice president of the Eastern Association of Endocrinologists and president of the Journal Club. And I'm not going to listen to any more of your capitalistic, quantum, friggin' dumb, limbo, mumbo jumbo. I'm going to show these to a radiologist.
Conclusion, bilateral aspiration pneumonia.
Do me a favor, take a look at these.
What's the story in this case?
35-year-old white male, acute onset of aphasia, no history of trauma.
What are you looking for?
Well, it looks to me like the architecture is somewhat abnormal.
This guy's a fucking gorilla.
There is no death. There is only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She's a living presence in her spiritual earthbound plane. They're attracted to the one thing about her that's different from themselves. Her life force. It is very strong. It gives off its own illumination. It is a light that implies life and memory of love and home and earth earthly pleasures, something they desperately desire, but can't have anymore. Right now, she's the closest thing to that, and that is a terrible distraction from the real light that has finally come for them. Do you understand me? These souls, for whatever reason, are not at rest, are also not aware that they have passed on. They're not part of consciousness as we know it. They're in a perpetual dream state, a nightmare from which they cannot awake. Inside the spectral light is salvation, a window to the next plane. They must pass through this membrane with friends who are waiting to guide them to new destinies. Carol Ann must help them cross over, and she will only hear her mother's voice. Now hold on to yourselves. There's one more thing. A terrible presence is in there with her. So much rage, so much betrayal. I've never sensed anything like it. I don't know what hovers over this house, but it was strong enough to punch a hole into this world and take your daughter away from you. It keeps Carol Ann very close to it and away from the spectral light. It lies to her. It says things only a child can understand. He's been using her to restrain the others. To her, he simply is another child. To us, it is the beast.
Last night, I dreamt I went to Mandalay again. It seemed to me I stood by the iron gate leading to the drive, and for a while I could not enter, for the way was barred to me. Then, like all dreamers, I was possessed of a sudden with supernatural powers and passed like a spirit through the barrier before me. The drive wound away in front of me, twisting and turning as it had always done. But as I advanced, I was aware that a change had come upon it. Nature had come into her own again, and little by little had encroached upon the drive with long, tenacious fingers. On and on wound the poor thread that had once been our drive. And finally, there was Mandalay. Mandalay, secretive and silent. Time could not mar the perfect symmetry of those walls. Moonlight can play odd tricks upon the fancy, and suddenly it seemed to me that light came from the windows. And then a cloud came upon the moon and hovered an instant like a dark hand before a face. The illusion went with it.
And, you've heard of Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf?
Yes, I have.
Well, that's what I dreamed about.
You dreamed you were Little Red Riding Hood?
No, I was the wolf.
What did you do?
I snarled. And then so all of a sudden I became Little Red Riding Hood. And then suddenly I was a lot of numbers.
Numbers?
Yes, I was a radio dial.
That's understandable. It's part of your profession, isn't it? Singing on the radio.
Yes. Yes, but you haven't heard it all yet. It seemed that all night long there were thousands of people that kept turning me off and turning me on and turning me off and turning me on. Half the time I was singing and the other half I was advertising. Then there were voices, thousands of voices. And then they started to chase me, to persecute me.
Who?
My persecutors.
Persecution complex.
Yes. Yeah, and then I was running away from them, and I was gaining miles ahead of them when all of a sudden I turned into a maple tree, and then I took a shortcut across the stream, and a huge fish raised itself out of the water and snapped at me. It was a dogfish. Then I looked behind me, and thousands of squirrels had jumped the river, and like a pack of hungry wolves were rushing at me. Oh, I was frantic.
Yes?
They were coming closer.
Yes?
They were on me from every side.
Yes?
From the front.
Yes?
From the back.
Yes?
On all sides of me. Their teeth snapping to get me. I couldn't escape.
What happened?
They got me.
I'm imbued with some special spirit. It's not a religious feeling at all. It's a shocking eruption of great electrical energy. I feel vivid and flashing as if suddenly I've been plugged into some great electromagnetic field. I feel connected to all living things, to flowers, birds, all the animals animals of the world. And even to some great, unseen, living force. What I think the Hindus call prana. It's not a great psychotic episode. I've never felt more orderly in my life. It's a shattering, beautiful sensation. It is the exalted flow of the space-time continuum, save that it is spaceless and timeless. Such loveliness. On the verge of some great, ultimate truth. I feel connected to all living things, to flowers, birds, all the animals of the world. And even to some great, unseen, living force. What I think the Hindus call prana. It's not a breakdown. I've never felt more orderly in my life. It's a shattering, beautiful sensation. It is the exalted flow of the space-time continuum, save that it is spaceless and timeless and of such loveliness. I feel on the verge of some great, ultimate truth.
Relationships make matter,
Music of the spheres.
as Kepler said,
And Shakespeare before him.
and Pythagoras before him. Now, this vision of a universe arranged in harmonies of sounds and relations is no new discovery. Today, physicists are simply proving that what we call an object, an atom, a molecule, a particle, is only an approximation, a metaphor. At the subatomic level, it dissolves into a series of interconnections, like chords of music. It's beautiful.
Yeah, but there are boundaries, aren't there? I mean, between you and me, for instance. We are two separate bodies, aren't we? That's not an illusion. Is it? Are you saying that there is actually a physical connection between you and me and between you and the wall behind you and the air and this bench?
Yes. At the subatomic level, there is a continual exchange of matter and energy between my hand and this wood, between the wood and the air, and even between you and me. I mean a real exchange of photons and electrons. Ultimately, whether we like it or not, we're all part of one inseparable web of relationships.
This is mechanical time, isn't it?
You bet it is, you bet. I sometimes think that this clock, this machine, is what constitutes humanity's first real break from the world of nature. Wouldn't you say so? Hello?
The clock did much more than that. It became the model of the cosmos. And then they mistook the model for the real thing. People got the idea that nature was just a giant clock, not a living organism, but a machine. Well, if I was to explain that, I'd have to go all the way back to Descartes, if you remember him.
Yeah? To be or not to be?
I think, therefore I am.
Yeah, well, we both went to college, yeah.
Well, Descartes was the primary architect of the view that sees the world as a clock. A mechanistic view that still dominates most of the world today, and it seems to me, especially you politicians.
Mechanistic. Is that a real word?
Mechanistic, mechanical, mechanics? Yeah, it's a good word.
Mechanistic, as if nature functions like a clock. You take it apart, reduce it to a number of small, simple pieces, easy to understand, analyze them, put them all back together again, and then you understand the whole.
Isn't that what's known as scientific thinking, Miss Hoffman? Really? What you call the mechanistic view, isn't that what the scientific method's all about?
Is it?
Well, I don't think so, but I'd like to kind of hear from the physicist, Jack.
All right, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Well, you're right in a way, Mr.
Jack. Call me Jack.
Okay, Jack, you are right in a sense. But it wasn't always so, not before Descartes. When he introduced such thinking, it amounted to a revolutionary break with the church. He said, I don't need the Pope to tell me how the world functions. I can find that out for myself. Because to me, the world is just a machine. And then he became fascinated with clockworks and made the clock into his central metaphor. He said, I consider the human body as nothing but a machine. A healthy man is like a well-made clock. A sick man is like an ill-made clock.
Well, the metaphor seems a little clumsy now, but it worked, didn't it?
Yes, so successfully that scientists came to believe that all living things, plants, animals, us, are nothing but machines. And that's the fallacy. It carried over into everything, arts, politics.
I don't know, it seems to me that most people don't even remember who Descartes was. I'm sorry, I guess I just don't follow you.
But he'd like to. If you could just break it down into 30-second media bites, that's more what he's used to.
Very funny. All right, what is it that I don't recognize? What's so bad about Descartes?
But there's nothing bad about Descartes. In fact, I think Descartes is wonderful. He was a godsend to the 17th century. But times have changed since then. We need a new way of understanding life. That pendulum, for example, has long since been replaced by a tiny quartz crystal. And these magnificent hand-forged wheels turned into a microchip the size of my thumbnail. That's how far modern science has left mechanistic thinking behind. But you politicians, you seem to have that clockwork still ticking in your head. Well, I don't know about Descartes, but I do know that Francis Bacon presided over the witch trials of King James I at a time when millions of women were tortured or burned for practicing folk medicine or worshipping pre-Christian goddesses or simply because they were unusual. I would probably have ended up on the stake myself. See, I don't believe it was a metaphor when Francis Bacon wrote that nature had to be hounded in her wanderings, bound into service, made a slave. He even said that scientists, with their new mechanical devices, had to torture nature's secrets out of her. Did you notice how he uses her when describing Mother Nature? As if nature was nothing but a witch. Yes. It's actually fair to say that this room represents a crisis of perception.
But this room was here for a long time before Descartes and Bacon. Violence goes on no matter how mankind understands the world, doesn't it? And exploitation. Of course, we'd all like to think it would be different if we saw things differently.
But hasn't modern science, technology, business done exactly what Francis Bacon preached? Tortured our planet. Didn't we just implement the old patriarchal idea about man dominating all?
I don't know, Sonia. Let me be the devil's advocate here for a minute. How much have we really tortured and hounded the planet? I mean, you could say not much compared to what the ice ages did to the world, for example. And who says that nature can't cope? We're all scared to death about the disappearing ozone layer, but we only started studying ozone levels about 10 years ago. It could be that these so-called holes in the atmosphere have been appearing and then disappearing again since the beginning of time. Couldn't it? Could be that nature has a healing mechanism that we don't even know about. It could be that this hysteria about ultraviolet rays is nothing more than that, just hysteria.
That's exactly what he said about the German forests only a few years ago. And look at them now. More than half of the trees in the Black Forest are dying. We can't explain it away any longer. We simply cannot take the risk. Right here around this island, the tides are slowing down. Maybe because of silt building up from garbage being dumped in the bay or from the overuse of fertilizers. Lakes can die, entire oceans become polluted. Topsoil, forests, water poisoned, dead. Things can change so fast. In the hands of man, nature becomes fragile. Rain becomes acid.
I agree with everything you said, but why this patriarchal fixation, I mean, in Salem, those women witches were betrayed by other women. Phyllis Schlafly, a woman, has written that God's greatest gift to mankind is the atom bomb. I mean, these are women. Why can't you just say what's patriarchal is what's evil in both men and women and let it go at that? There's plenty of that to go around. Unless, of course, you happen to believe that these women were brainwashed by men like Patty Hearst.
Why are you so scornful? Look, there are two great principles functioning in this entire living world. The male principle, pick the adjective, the aggressive, dominating, whatever, and the female principle, nurturing, caretaking, gentle, whatever. What I am saying is that these two principles may have been in a rough balance, but now the men, and yes, I do think it is the men, have created the tools, the weapons, both intellectually and physically, to bring these two principles way out of balance. We have been placing mechanistic tools in the hands of power-oriented patriarchal people. I'm saying you men are out of control now. And I, you, we all, we are the victims. So what's the risk? What's wrong with giving the female principle an opportunity? By reducing all physical phenomena to the motion of material particles, the motion caused by the force of gravity, he was able to describe the exact effect of gravity on any object with precise mathematical equations.
Why? What is the nature of light?
To understand the nature of light, you have to know what matter is made of.
I thought it was made of atoms.
What's an atom? Well, Newton thought it was small, solid particles. But that's not what scientists saw when they observed atoms for the first time. What they saw was totally unexpected and shocking.
You mean when they discovered that atoms were made up of even smaller particles, a nucleus with electrons whirling around it?
Not only that, they were moving in relatively vast regions of empty space. That's what shocked the scientists up. Atoms consist mainly of empty space.
What does that mean, vast regions of empty space? Atoms are tiny.
Yes, they are. This is what's so hard to visualize. See, the size of atoms is so far removed from our ordinary sense of scale and proportion that it's extremely hard to get a feeling for the relative sizes and distances of their particles. Ask yourself, how many atoms are there in an orange? Now, to answer this, you'll have to blow up the orange to a size where you can actually see the atoms. You'll have to blow up the orange until it's reached the size of the Earth. The atoms inside of it will then be the size of cherries. Myriads of cherries tightly packed into an orange the size of the Earth.
Wow, what an image. I'm serious. I was trying to shrink the Earth orange back down into the size of an orange and imagine all those cherries whizzing around inside of it. It made me dizzy. This is a dangerous height to be dizzy at. But okay, you say that the atom is the size of a cherry and that in that cherry atom there's all this empty space. Well, what about the nucleus? There is a nucleus in there, right? I mean, how big is that? That's where we're going here, isn't it?
Invisible is the answer. If we blow up the atom to the size of a football, the nucleus would still be invisible. If we blow up the atom to the size of a sphere that would fit into this room here, the nucleus would still be invisible.
What if you blew it up to the size of this island? To the size of the rock we're standing on?
Okay. We would blow the atom, the cherry, up to the size of this island. Okay, then the nucleus would be the size of a small pebble. Something like that. And the electrons would be much smaller still. We would have to look for them all the way down there at the edge of the island. And the whole space in between would be empty.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's weird to see weird in poetry.
So what you're saying is that if there were a sphere large enough to contain this whole island, what it would actually consist of is a pebble and a few grains of sand. That's all this huge sphere contains. In other words, nothing. It's empty. But if this rock is made up of spheres like that, then what makes it so solid? Why can't I pass my hand through it? Why don't we fall through it?
Yeah, why don't we fall through everything? Why doesn't everything fall through everything?
Now remember that all the Newtonian concepts were based on things that could actually be seen, or at least visualized. But what they were now finding in this strange and unexpected world were concepts that could no longer be visualized. And when they went on battling with this absurd phenomena of atomic physics, they were forced to admit to themselves that they didn't have a language, not even an adequate way of thinking to describe their new discoveries. They were forced to think in entirely new ways in terms of radically new concepts. To understand why matter is so solid, they had to question the conventional ideas about the very existence of matter. And after many frustrating years, they were forced to admit that matter does not exist with certainty in definite places, but rather shows tendencies to exist.
Tendency? What the hell does that mean?
Now, let's say we want to observe an electron out there. Now, we cannot say that it is in a definite place. We can rather say it has a tendency to be out there in the front rather than in the back. Or here to the left, rather than over there to the right. In scientific language, we actually don't speak about tendencies. We speak about probabilities.
I seem to remember voting for a bill in the Senate that gave some physicists a lot of money for a detector that they said would tell them exactly where an electron is. Were we being gypped?
Not at all. The strange thing is that when you actually make a measurement of the electron, it is in a definite place. But between measurements, you cannot say that it is in a definite place, or that it has traveled a definite path from one place to another.
You mean when you want to measure it, it just sort of shows up?
Yeah.
Oh, kind of like out-of-work actors or presidential candidates like Jack Edwards. What do you think? What do you think? Hey, tough guy.
Yeah.
My knees hurt.
Okay, let me get this straight. You measure it and the electron is there. It shows up. But in between measurements, you can't say for sure that it's in a definite place, or even that it went on a definite path from one place to another. So how does it go from here to there? It moves, doesn't it?
No.
You mean it stays in the same place?
No.
Well, wait a minute. Either the electron moves or it doesn't move.
Well, you can't say that. Well, are you getting a feeling now of what these physicists felt? You see, an electron doesn't move from place to place, and it doesn't stay in one place either. It manifests itself as probability patterns spread out in space. And the shape of these probability patterns changes with time, something which might seem like movement to human perception.
Are you saying that the electron sort of gets smeared out over a large region, and then when you measure it with the measuring gun, it collapses into a small point?
You got it. You see, all subatomic particles, electrons, protons, neutrons, manifest this strange existence between potentiality and reality.
So at the subatomic level, there are no solid objects.
No, they are not.
Well, if there are no solid objects at the subatomic level, how are there solid objects at any level?
That's the amazing thing. This simple question, what makes this rock so solid, goes way beyond our power of imagination. I mean, I cannot explain this to you in visual terms. Of course, I can do it in mathematical equations, but there's no metaphor.
How can you live in a world that's unmetaphorical? I mean, you have to perceive reality in some way. I mean, this is solid.
Okay. Let's take an atom from within this granite, a silicon atom with its 14 electrons. Now, the probability patterns of these electrons arrange themselves like shells around the nucleus, each shell containing several electrons. Now, within the shells, the electrons are everywhere at the same time, so to speak. But the probability patterns that resemble shells are extremely stable and very hard to compress.
Matter is solid because probability patterns are difficult to compress.
That's as good as it gets.
So I was going to sleep through Mr. Giddis's physics class. That little model he made out of Tinker Toys with sticks and balls, that was wrong, right?
Right, wrong. Yeah, it's a lousy visualization, but then no one did it any better.
If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear as it is, infinite.
Life's a bunch of probability patterns running around. Probability patterns of what?
Of interconnections.
What?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that these probabilities are not probabilities of things, but probabilities of interconnections.
See, Jack, that's what she was trying to tell you.
See, we tend to think of subatomic particles as some kind of small billiard balls or small grains of sand. But for physicists, a particle has no independent existence. A particle is essentially a set of relations that reach outward to connect with other things.
What are those other things, please?
They are interconnections of yet other things, which also turn out to be interconnections, and so on and so on. You see, in atomic physics, we never end up with any things at all. The essential nature of matter lies not in objects, but in interconnections.
Ah! Everybody knows the chord. It's a third, the most basic of harmonies. Carries with it a very distinctive feeling, no? And yet, its individual notes carry none of that feeling. Therefore, the essence of the chord lies in
relationships.
And the relationship between time and pitch
makes melody.
Makes melody. Relationships make music.
Relationships make matter.
Music of the spheres.
As Kepler said.
And Shakespeare before him.
And Pythagoras before him. Now, this vision of a universe arranged in harmonies of sounds and relations is no new discovery. Today, physicists are simply proving that what we call an object, an atom, a molecule, a particle, is only an approximation, a metaphor. At the subatomic level, it dissolves into a series of interconnections, like chords of music. It's beautiful.
Yeah, but there are boundaries, aren't there? I mean, between you and me, for instance. We are two separate bodies, aren't we? That's not an illusion. Is it? Are you saying that there is actually a physical connection between you and me and between you and the wall behind you and the air and this bench?
Yes. At the subatomic level, there is a continual exchange of matter and energy between my hand and this wood, between the wood and the air, and even between you and me. I mean, a real exchange of photons and electrons. Ultimately, whether we like it or not, we're all part of one inseparable web of relationships.
How can you talk usefully about a tree without talking about its roots or its leaves or its bark?
Well, I could, without even naming the parts you mentioned. Oh, Cartesian would look at a tree and conceptually take it to pieces. But then he would never really understand the nature of the tree. A systems thinker would look at a tree and see the seasonal exchange between tree and earth, earth and sky. Would see the annual cycle, which really is one big breath the earth takes through its forests, providing us with oxygen, the breath of life, linking the earth with the sky and us with the universe. A systems thinker would look at the tree and see the life of the tree only in relation to the life of the whole forest. Would see the tree as a habitat for birds, a home for insects. But if you look at a tree and try to understand it as something separate, you will be bewildered by the millions of fruits it's producing in its lifetime, because only 1 or 2 trees will grow from those fruits. So if you look at the tree and see it as a member of a larger living system, that abundance of fruits will make sense, because hundreds upon hundreds of forest animals and birds will survive because of them. Interdependence. And the tree cannot survive on its own either. To draw water from the ground, it needs the fungus that grows at the tip of each root. And the fungus needs the root to survive, and the root needs the fungus. If one dies, the other dies. And there are millions of relationships like this in our world, each depending on each other for life. The systems theory recognizes this web of relationships as the essence of all living things. Only the uninformed would call such a notion naive or romantic, because this dependency we all share is a scientific fact.
A web of relationships.
Yes, but this time it is the web of life itself. The theory of living systems actually provides you with an outline of an answer to that eternal question, what is life?